All right, so today we're jumping into a story from ancient scripture that honestly feels surprisingly modern. It's all about a leader named Cainan who had to figure out how to guide his people through a time of just deep corruption and societal collapse. Let's dive right in.
So it really makes you wonder, right? How does good even survive, let alone thrive, when it feels like evil has the upper hand? We're going to see how Canaan navigated a world where these powerful secret societies, kind of like organized crime syndicates, had pretty much taken over everything.
Okay, so first things first. To really get who Cainan was, you have to picture the world he was born into. And believe me, this wasn't just tough times. It was an era completely defined by this shadowy, powerful, secret society that was poisoning literally everything.
And I'm not talking about petty theft here. This was a full-blown, sophisticated, well, the text calls it a murder cult. They used extortion, bloodshed, you name it, to spread their power. They were literally moving through the land, starting feuds, carrying out hits, and corrupting governments from the inside. You know, their real power came from their secrecy. This quote here explains it perfectly. They had secret signs, secret words. It was all about creating this brotherhood. Think about it, an oath-bound network that basically gave you a get-out-of-jail-free card. You could commit murder, theft, whatever, and you were protected.
So what was their endgame? Pure chaos, really. As they got more powerful through all these assassinations and robberies, society just started to fall apart, and the scripture is super clear on this. It draws a straight line from the secret group to all the wars and bloodshed that followed. Okay, on to our next section. A leader is chosen. So, right in the middle of all this darkness, a new leader steps up. But here's the thing. He was not the guy you would have expected. See, back then, birth order was a huge deal. It basically decided your whole life. And Cainan? He probably wasn't the eldest son. So his path to leadership wasn't just handed to him. It was all going to come down to his character, not his birthright. And man, his character was obvious pretty early on. Get this. At just 40 years old, way before he had any official title or power, he was already getting revelations straight from God. That's a huge sign, right? It showed he was spiritually ready. His dad, Enos, totally saw this in him. He knew Cainan was what the text calls a choice spirit, and he actually picked him to be the heir over his older brothers. I mean, that's a game-changing decision. It set this massive precedent that in their line, who you were was way more important than when you were born. All right, next up, journey to a new land. So the people of God looked around at their society, totally corrupted by these Maonites, and realized it was a lost cause. They couldn't save it. So they made a really radical choice. Pack it all up, leave everything, and just start over. So following Enos, Canaan's dad, the whole community starts this massive migration. You can think of them as refugees, really. Refugees from evil. They left their homes behind to find a new place where they could just live their lives in peace. And here's a really cool detail. In this huge tribute to his son, Enos names their new promised land Canaan. That tells you everything, doesn't it? It shows just how much respect Cainan already had. He was the symbol of their hope for the future. Okay, let's talk about this fateful meeting, because there was a big problem. A really critical piece was missing. For Cainan to officially become the patriarch, he had to be ordained by the highest priesthood authority on the planet. And, well, that person was nowhere to be found. See, according to their traditions, this authority had to be passed down hand to hand in a perfect unbroken chain from the oldest patriarch. Only one guy could do it. Only one person held the keys. And that one person, it was Adam, the first man. But Adam hadn't come with them on the migration, so he was miles and miles away. This put Cainan in a really tough spot. He's the chosen leader, right? But he can't get the official ordination for decades. Imagine trying to lead your people with that hanging over your head. Then, almost 50 years after God first called him, something wild happens. The records call it a singular coincidence. Cainan is out journeying, and who does he run into? Adam. Their paths just cross, completely out of the blue. And right there, at this place called Shedolamek, Adam finally ordains him, making his authority official. Which brings us to our last section, the patriarchal legacy. Okay, so now his authority is sealed, right? Both by God and by man. Cainan then goes on to live this incredibly long, impactful life, building a legacy that would last for generations. And when I say long, I mean long. His lifespan was, wait for it, 910 years. That is just staggering. It meant he could guide his people for centuries. He was like a living link to their past, this absolute rock of stability in a really chaotic world. But he wasn't just some old ruler who lived forever. No, he was a scholar, a prophet. He was fluent in the sacred Adamic language. His sermons were so important that they were actually written down and saved in what they called the Book of Remembrance. And of course, he raised a big family to keep that righteous line going.
You know, maybe his biggest legacy was making sure that chain of authority stayed unbroken. He built this righteous society from the ground up and then successfully passed the torch to the next generation, specifically to his great-grandson, a guy you might have heard of, the future prophet Enoch.
So when you look at the whole story, it's pretty incredible. Through sheer worthiness and a whole lot of patience, Cainan literally built a sanctuary of good in an age of darkness. And his legacy? It set the stage perfectly for his great-grandson Enoch. But Enoch's story, wow. It starts with a personal struggle that made him a very unlikely prophet. So what exactly was that struggle? Well, that's a story for our next explainer.